Very good evening from the Sports Desk. The Interim Board and the Members' Council of Cricket South Africa are at loggerheads again. Over the weekend, the two bodies released contrasting statements about where things are in fixing the governance failures of cricket in this country. The composition of the incoming board is at stake at the moment, with disagreement on its independence. Chairperson of the Interim Board, Dr. Stavros Nicolau, of course, will be joining me now via Zoom from Johannesburg. But, Doctor, very good evening to you. But before we get there, of course, Business for South Africa has called on government to push the elderly and vulnerable up the priority list. So how high are we talking? The first phase with healthcare workers? And just with that as well, would Business for South Africa be prepared to get involved in helping government procure vaccines at a quicker rate, of course?
So, Marina, thanks very much for having me on your program this evening. So let me answer your first question on the vaccines, and then we can transition to sport after that. The position of Business for South Africa is that we have a defined three-phase program in which we sequence the various segments of the population and at what stage they ought to be vaccinated. We all know that the first phase is the healthcare workers. There are around 1 million healthcare workers that need to be vaccinated, and that program is in process right now. On completion of phase 2, which will take us into the end of April, there or thereabouts, so in quarter 2, we were due to vaccinate the next segment of the population, which is those that work in congregate settings, essential workers, and then the high-risk and elderly population. Then we would move into the third phase, of course, which is the rest of the population. So I think we all know that the AstraZeneca vaccine didn't come off because of the dominant variant that we experienced in our country. So that has placed a significant pressure on quarter 2 and the availability of vaccines for quarter 2. So what we're proposing is, in the short term, if you don't have sufficient vaccines, you need to not overhaul the program. We're not calling for that. We are calling for a retweaking of the program. Because you don't have sufficient vaccines in quarter 2. Of course, if the position improves, then you will change the sequencing again. But in the absence of sufficient vaccines, it makes sense to first target, after your healthcare workers, the elderly population of this country. Those are the ones that are at the highest risk of mortality and also have the highest correlation to comorbid diseases, which is the highest risk factor, of course. So it makes a lot of sense to us. It's what many other countries have done internationally. And this is what we are calling for, a tweaking of the sequencing and letting the elderly go first.
All right, let's look at the cricket matters, Doctor. You released a statement on Saturday saying the Members' Council is refusing to cooperate with the call for a majority independence board. Now, briefly, how did this come about?
Firstly, this is an interim board that has been appointed for a finite lifespan by the Minister. Its appointment is exactly to restore governance to cricket. There have been numerous governance failures in recent times, and it's a great pity that instead of applauding our cricketers, our women cricketers, and I want to congratulate them again for the significant the 2 series that they pulled off, 2 series win that they pulled off in India. Instead of that being the focus, it's really disappointing to the cricket public that we are caught up in these governance failures. So the purpose of this interim board is to restore governance, and a fundamental principle to restoring governance amongst the 9-point mandate that we received from the Minister and his team is that you have a majority independent board. That is contained in the Nicholson recommendation, which is now 9 years old, hasn't been implemented in 9 years. It was carried out at a significant cost to the taxpayer, at the end of the day, that's who pays for it, and a significant cost to Cricket South Africa. So it is disappointing that after some weeks of discussion, the Members' Council on Saturday morning indicated that 8 of their 14 members are not prepared to accept what is a well-defined principle in governance, not only in our own country, but globally, that of having majority independent directors. So 8 of the 14 voted against it. We do require a simple majority of the Members' Council in order to proceed with this very basic fundamental tenet of governance, which is a majority independent board.
Have you gotten any response to exactly how the voting went, as you say that it went 8-4?
Well, we've written this evening to the Members' Council requesting, in the interest of transparency, for disclosure of those affiliates who voted for and who voted against. And I think that we will be reaching out to both the Minister, which we have in fact done. So the mandate came from the Minister. The Minister represents 60 million South Africans at the end of the day, and that is the mandate that we're responding to. So I think the Minister will, in some form or shape, I don't want to speak on his behalf, be taking this up with the Members' Council. And then I think independently of that, we would need to speak to those affiliates when we have disclosure around this as to try and understand what their position is. It's an inexplicable position. And I'm afraid finding themselves on the wrong side of history at the moment. You know, we've got one final shot at getting this right and restoring governance to the game. And I'm afraid these 8 unions are finding themselves on the wrong side. I think the team at CSA are prepared to invest some time this week in re-explaining this very basic fundamental principle of governance to them in an effort that this changes their minds in the short term.
And just very quickly before I let you go, Doctor, are you possibly going to be looking for an extension until the 15th of April, as there was an extension to the 15th of March? Or is the AGM actually going to happen on the 2 dates you've proposed, 10th and 17th?
Well, I think this board have indicated their availability only till the end of April, right? In fact, we were hoping to get this over the line sooner than that. You cannot have an AGM unless you get the memorandum of incorporation agreed. This is a major stumbling block, the majority independent board, and I'm hoping, because one has to be realistic but also optimistic, I'm hoping that with the Minister's intervention, I'm sure he'll have a discussion with the MC in some form or shape, as I said. I'm hoping that they're able to see light and get on the right side of history, and then an AGM can proceed on the date that was indicated.
Doctor, thank you so much for your time this evening. That is Dr. Stavros Nicolaou, coming to us in his capacity as the chairperson of Business for South Africa and the chairperson of the Cricket South Africa Interim Board. Sally,